You hear that? No, exactly. That's the sound of a city forgetting how to breathe. Funny thing about warrants, they're loud on paper, but in real life, they whisper. And this one didn't chase you, didn't knock, didn't flash lights. It made phones stop ringing, rooms empty faster, eyes drop to the floor. Look who they tried to put a cage around. Surprise. You don't hunt what rewrites the maze. They stamped their authority, signed their courage, declared control, and somehow traffic slowed. Sirens hesitated. Even the criminals went polite. You feel it, don't you? That itch, that quiet alarm. Because when the system panics, it always pretends it's calm. They didn't issue a warrant. They announced they were scared of you, and now the city knows something has shifted, something irreversible. Smile. This is where the rules start watching you. Listen closely, not to the noise, to what stopped making it. Because the moment they issued that warrant, the air changed. Not louder, thinner, paper, ink, signatures stacked, like cardboard authority. That's all it was. A crown made of paper. Funny how they treat it like a blade, like something sharp, dangerous, final. But weapons chase, weapons hunt. This was a confession. See, warrants aren't meant for power. They're meant for panic. They are what people use when they don't understand what they're facing, only that it scares them. They didn't know your plan, didn't know your reach, didn't know your next move. So they did the oldest trick in the book. They named you as if naming turns chaos into paperwork. Cute. They thought authority lives in stamps, in seals, in letterheads. They forgot something. Authority only works on people who believe in it. You didn't flinch, didn't scramble, didn't disappear. No late-night escapes, no desperate alibis. You stayed exactly where you were. And that's when the real test began. Because power is revealed by movement. And suddenly, it wasn't you moving. Meetings canceled, routes changed, voices lowered. They called it procedure. You call it fear. Officers hesitated. Enemies went silent. Allies pretended they weren't watching. And you didn't run. Everyone else did. That's the hidden rule they never teach. When false authority speaks, real power waits, and when paper tries to wear a crown, the throne always shakes first. You notice it, right? That quiet, that feels too careful. Because calm doesn't watch you. Calm doesn't hold its breath. This did. They called it order, said things were under control. That's always the line, right before fear starts doing the math. See, chaos is loud, messy, honest. Silence is disciplined. Streets didn't empty because of danger. They emptied because of uncertainty. No one knew where to stand anymore. Every sound felt like a mistake waiting to be noticed. Doors closed softly. Phones went unanswered. People suddenly became very busy doing nothing. Funny thing, when fear spreads, it doesn't scream, it reorganizes. They stopped saying names, stopped asking questions, stopped being brave in public. All that confidence, the speeches, the posturing, gone, because silence is what happens. When everyone realizes they're not holding the weapon, they're standing in the line of fire. You weren't announced, you weren't seen, and still, rooms adjusted around the idea of you. That's power without volume. That's pressure without touch. Authority needs noise, commands, repetition. Fear only needs a rumor that refuses to die. And the city knew something. They couldn't prove that whatever they'd started didn't make you weaker. It made you heavier, like gravity increasing, one grain at a time. People didn't look over their shoulders for police. They looked for permission. Permission to breathe, to to move, to speak freely. But permission was gone. No sirens, no riots, no resistance, just a collective pause. Because silence isn't peace, it's recognition. Recognition that control has slipped its leash. Recognition that something unaccountable is still standing and hasn't said a word yet. Smile. This is the moment they realize quiet doesn't mean safe. It means something is waiting. Let's talk about the hands, not the uniforms, not the titles. The hands, the ones that held the pen, hovered, hesitated, then pressed down anyway. Those men loved the moment, the signing, the feeling of weight, like history was bending. For them, they told themselves this was courage, that bravery smells like ink and approval. What they really signed was distance, distance from consequences, distance from you, because no one signs a warrant face to face. That's not how fear works. They did it in rooms, with locked doors, muted phones, reassuring nods, surrounded by others who needed this to be real as badly as they did. A circle of confidence, borrowed, fragile. Here's what they didn't expect. Silence followed them home, not the good kind. Chairs felt too stiff, rooms too wide, every sound suspicious. Sleep slipped, because once authority is written down, it starts asking questions back. What if it doesn't work? What if he doesn't respond? What if nothing happens? That's the nightmare. Not resistance, not chaos, indifference. They kept checking for updates, waiting for motion, for noise. None came, and that's when the bravado began to decay, because power expects feedback, reports, friction, pushback. Instead, nothing, no hiding, give them a story. And without a story, they had to sit with the truth. They didn't act from understanding. They acted from rumor, from pressure, from the fear of being last, to admit they didn't know. They wanted control. What they got was exposure. Because the moment after you sign, the moment after the pen lifts, you realize something terrifying. If this fails, everyone will know who caused it. And suddenly, those powerful men weren't watching you anymore. They were watching each other, waiting to see who blinks first. This is the part they don't print. The lesson between lines, the test inside the test. Because this was never about capture, never about justice, never about paperwork, traveling from desk to desk. It was an exam, a quiet one, designed for people who think power is something you use. See, every system has a curriculum it never admits exists. Rules on paper, rules in practice, rules whispered, in private rooms after doors close. This was one of those lessons. They wanted to see who would panic, who would flinch, who would expose themselves by moving too fast or saying too much. That's how they sort people. Not by guilt, by reaction. The amateurs scatter, the desperate speak, the pretenders over-explain. And then there's you. You treated the warrant like background noise, like weather that doesn't reach indoors. No statements, no defenses, no performance. That broke their grading system, because the curriculum assumes everyone participates. You didn't. You let the test sit there, unanswered, unrespected, and suddenly the secret clubs started whispering. Not about you, about the problem, because hidden hierarchies recognize one thing instantly: refusal, not rebellion, not compliance, refusal to validate the frame. That's graduate-level behavior. That's when angels get nervous and monsters lean forward. They felt it, that uncomfortable truth that some people aren't meant to be processed. You're meant to be recognized. So the test inverted. Instead of measuring you, it measured them. Who could stay calm without control? Who could trust paper without proof? Who could sit still without reassurance? Most failed quietly. They kept smiling, kept nodding, kept pretending procedure was still working. But underneath, The realization spread. This wasn't an arrest scenario. It was a sorting moment. And you passed by not playing. That's the real lesson. They never tell you. Sometimes graduation isn't marked by applause. It's marked by silence from people who suddenly know you're no longer in their class. Control never collapses all at once. That would be obvious, embarrassing. No, it leaks. Slow, quiet, through seams no one thought to reinforce. Orders started stalling, not refused, just delayed. Let's revisit, wait for confirmation, hold position. The language of people who don't trust what they're saying anymore. See, real authority moves clean. It doesn't second guess. It doesn't ask for approval twice. But theirs did. Meetings ran long. Decisions came late. Everyone wanted someone else to speak first. Because when power starts questioning itself, nobody wants their name on the sentence. Radios stayed quiet a little too long. Cars idled with nowhere urgent to go. Not failure, friction. And friction is deadly to systems built on speed. You didn't apply pressure. That's what terrified them. Because the leaks appeared without force, without threats, without resistance. Just your continued presence. Calm, unchanged. That's when the cracks went social, not technical. People trust machines. They suspect humans. Lances lingered. Instructions were repeated. Silence followed commands, not defiance, hesitation, the kind that spreads. Because control only works when it's believed by the people enforcing it. And belief was thinning. Some started recalculating risk, loyalty, distance. Not out loud, inside. That's where collapse begins. The city didn't slip into chaos. It self-adjusted, like a crowd, making room for something dense, moving through it. Paths cleared unintentionally, rules bent without notice, barriers softened, no announcement, no rebellion, just adaptation. And you became the variable. They couldn't stabilize, not because you moved, because you didn't. Control tried to measure you with procedures, but procedures need compliance to function, and you never gave it. That's when power shifted. Not dramatically, not visibly. It drained like water finding every weak joint at once. They still gave orders. They just didn't sound like promises anymore. They sounded like hope. And hope has no place where control used to live. This is where it turned. Not loudly, not publicly, but permanently. Because the warrant was supposed to narrow the world around you. It did the opposite. Routes shifted, schedules changed, people started coordinating without being asked, not in your name, in your direction. Funny thing, fear doesn't just repel, it organizes. When enough people sense the same pressure point, they start shaping themselves around it. The city learned fast. Certain streets stayed clear. Certain doors stayed open. Certain conversations ended early. Not because you demanded it, because assumption took over. And assumption is faster than any order. They thought exposure would isolate you. Instead, it created informal protection. No badges, no chains, just instinct, eyes that noticed before speaking, hands that delayed before acting. The system wanted a confrontation. What it got was avoidance, and avoidance starves authority because power depends on reaction. Chase, arrest, conflict. You gave none. Criminals adjusted first. They always do. Paths changed, respect sharpened, boundaries redrew themselves, not loyalty, recognition. Then came the quiet irony. Enforcement started benefiting from the same fear meant for you. Order improved, noise dropped, problems solved themselves by not happening. The city behaved better, with you unresolved, than it ever did, under full control. That's the backfire. When a system creates the very condition it tries to eliminate, they wanted you cornered. They ended up cornering themselves. Because now, moving against you meant disturbing a balance everyone felt, and no one wants to be the one who breaks a quiet that finally works. The warrant still exists. Paper doesn't disappear, but its meaning inverted. It's no longer a threat, it's a warning. Not for you, for anyone thinking of making the next move. This is what comes after. No victory marches, no company. Inclusion stamped, in bold, just quiet, but not the old kind. Not the nervous silence, not the holding breath calm. This one is settled, the kind that doesn't ask who's in charge anymore, because the question answered itself. You never took the throne, never raised your voice, never reached for control. You let the room decide, and the room always knows who doesn't need permission. That's the paradox. They never plan for power that doesn't insist, authority that doesn't explain. It stabilizes things. The city didn't bend to you. It aligned. Traffic flows better. Conflicts resolve earlier. Everyone senses where the edge is now. Not because of rule books, because awareness sharpened. That's the quiet, a shared understanding that some forces don't announce themselves. They're felt. The warrant remains filed, stamped, archived, a relic, proof that once the system tried to name what it couldn't categorize, and failed gracefully. You don't stand above the rules, you stand where the rules rearrange themselves. Joker would laugh here, low, satisfied, not because chaos won, because excess noise stopped. This isn't dominance, it's calibration, and the calm that follows, it's not peace, it's recognition. Recognition that the city learned something without being told that quiet forces don't need territory. They create gravity, and gravity doesn't argue. It just waits, and everything else finds its place. And here's the part no one knows how to describe, because language was built for motion, for cause and effect, for winners and losers. This state, it slips between definitions. You can feel it in how people speak slower now, how they choose words carefully, how confidence no longer sounds like shouting. The city learned restraint, not from enforcement, from proximity, from knowing that escalation is optional and unnecessary, that the upgrade, fear used to spike, then fade. Now it educates. Everyone understands where excess ends, where attention becomes dangerous, where ambition turns visible. And visibility isn't safe anymore. That's the shift they never predicted. Not submission, not rebellion, self-regulation. You didn't become a symbol. Symbols invite challenges. You became a condition, something that exists without explanation, without a spokesperson, without boundaries. And those are the hardest things to move against, because you can't argue with what doesn't respond. You can't intimidate what doesn't signal fear. You can't dismantle what never announced itself as a structure. The city doesn't worship you. It doesn't even talk about you. It adjusts. And that's how you know this isn't temporary. Silence returned, but differently, not empty, occupied by understanding, by caution, by the sense that the game is still on, but the rules no longer reward noise. And somewhere deep inside, the system, a truth settled in quietly. Some power doesn't conquer. It persists, and persistence outlives everything that needs permission.
Ouch. Damn. Do you feel it? That silence, that suffocating silence right before the storm. Everyone was staring. Everyone was holding their breath. Everyone knew the stage was set. Because tonight, they were bringing out their crown jewel, their biggest weapon, the one they worshipped like a god. They polished it. They paraded it. They whispered its name like a prayer in the dark, a weapon built from the ashes of every fallen soul before you. They believed it was unbeatable, untouchable, immortal, like destiny itself had crafted this blade just to slice your story in half. Crowds gathered, not to cheer for you, but to witness your downfall. Oh, how their eyes glowed with hunger, hungry to see you kneel, hungry to see that weapon do its work. And your enemies? They smiled. They smirked like gods playing chess with mortals. Their lips curled with a single promise. This is it, the end. You could almost hear the whisper echo through the room. No one survives this. No one ever has. But here's the delicious irony. That very weapon they cherished, that shiny, monstrous tool of fear and destruction, it was never alive. It was never breathing. It was never thinking. And that's where they slipped. That's where they forgot the truth. Because a weapon is nothing more than steel in silence, until someone dares to pick it up, and when it landed in your hands, oh, that's when their nightmare began. They thought the weapon controlled the fight. They thought the weapon wrote the ending. They thought the weapon was the master. But they forgot one thing. The weapon doesn't control the wielder. The wielder controls the weapon. And you didn't just wield it. You bent it. You broke it. You reshaped it, until their sharpest blade became your smallest tool, like a matchstick in the hands of a pyromaniac, like a toy in the grip of a madman, like destiny itself being mocked, twisted and laughed at. Their greatest weapon, the one they kissed, the one they swore upon, the one they placed every ounce of faith in, you reduced it to nothing more than an accessory, a side piece, a joke. And as you raised it in your hand, not to kill, but to play, the whole world realized something chilling. You were never the prey. You were never the hunted. You were the architect of the game. And that weapon, it was never designed to end you. It was built to announce you. Ouch. Do you hear that sound? It's not the crowd cheering. It's not your enemies laughing anymore. It's the sound of panic. It's the sound of realization. It's the sound of an empire collapsing. Because the weapon they worshipped just became your smallest tool. Ah, the irony. The thing they worshipped, the thing they trusted more than their own blood, the thing they sharpened, polished, fed, and believed would bring your end. That very weapon was their trap, but not your trap. No, no, no. Their own. You see, I didn't fight the weapon. I didn't run from it. I didn't beg for mercy. I didn't shiver when they placed it in front of me like some holy relic. I invited it. I let them bring it to the battlefield. Not because I was blind. Not because I was foolish. But because I wanted them to. You know the difference between a fool and a predator. The fool avoids the danger. The predator stares it down and smiles. They thought I didn't see it coming. Oh, but I did. I saw every step, every hand reaching for the trigger, every whisper, this will finish him, this will break him, and I let them. Because weapons are not power. Weapons are temptation. Weapons are chains. Weapons are the distraction that blinds the one who wields them. So I waited. I stood there, silent, still, like prey that doesn't flinch, and the battlefield became a stage. Every eye watching, every breath caught, every hand trembling, waiting for the strike. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The silence before thunder, the calm before collapse, the whole world holding its breath, convinced the moment had arrived. And then, click, nothing, not the roar of victory, not the explosion they promised, not the death they craved, just silence. The silence of fear snapping back in their throats, the silence of an audience realizing the script just flipped, because when the smoke cleared, The weapon wasn't pointed at me. It wasn't even theirs anymore. It was in my hands, smaller than my shadow, smaller than my laugh, smaller than the madness in my eyes. Do you see the irony now? The weapon they trusted became the cage that locked them in. The trap they laid became the leash I wrapped around their necks. They thought they were hunters, but hunters who worship their weapons always fall to the prey who worships nothing. Because I am not afraid to stand bare-handed. I am not afraid of silence. I am not afraid of their so-called untouchable blade. And that's why I own it now. That's why it bends to me. That's why it shrunk into nothing but a tool. Their trap became my stage. Their silence became my applause. And their weapon, their beautiful, terrifying, untouchable weapon, became smaller than my shadow. They thought the weapon was the answer. Steel, fire, chaos, the comfort of something they could point and pull, and watch the world bend in their favor. That's where their psychology always lived, inside the illusion that power was something external, something they could hold, something they could buy, sharpen, reload. But that's where the game flips. Because you never put your trust in steel. You never needed the fire. You never worshipped the chaos. You trusted one thing only, your mind. Steady, cold, ruthless. See, they never understood this simple truth. Fear isn't in the weapon. Fear isn't in the explosion. Fear isn't in the sharpness of the blade. Fear lives in the hesitation before the strike. And you learned to erase hesitation from your bloodstream. Their weapon was never yours to fear. It was yours to bend. That's the difference. When they raised it high, thinking it would control the battlefield, you smiled, not because the steel glistened, but because you knew the steel was nothing without the hands holding it. And your hands, steady, calm, almost playful, you turned what once froze the crowd in terror into something smaller than a toy in your palm. It wasn't destruction anymore, it was entertainment. They brought fire. You turned it into a candlelight. They brought chaos. You folded it into silence. They brought fear. You made it laughable. And that's where the psychology collapses. Because their entire plan, their entire faith, their entire confidence was built on the belief that weapons equal power. But you proved that power isn't about what you hold. It's about how you hold it. It's about who has the steadiness not to flinch when everything is burning. That's why the battlefield bowed to you. Not because you carried more fire than they did, but because you carried less fear than they could ever dream of. Imagine the irony. The same steel they polished, the same weapon they prayed to, the same chaos they believed was unbeatable, now in your hands, twisted, bent, a shadow of itself. Their greatest strength became your smallest plaything. Their confidence became your stage prop. Their weapon became your toy. And oh, how toys break, easily, effortlessly, with the flick of a wrist, with the turn of a smile. What they once saw as untouchable became laughable in your grip. It wasn't the weapon that mattered, you whispered. It was the hands steady enough to bend it. And now the psychology of fear is shattered. They're trembling, not because you hold the weapon, but because you showed them what true power looks like when fear has no oxygen left to breathe. And once the mind flips, once they realize steel is nothing against silence, chaos is nothing against control, fear is nothing against a steady hand, that's when the game ends. Not with an explosion, not with a scream, but with the silence of a battlefield where their weapon is no longer theirs, where power has flipped, and their psychology has broken. Dominance. That word doesn't roar, it whispers. It's not the sound of boots marching, it's the silence that follows when an army realizes it has no footing left. The weapon, oh the glorious weapon they paraded, polished, worshipped, once a titan, once the shadow that stretched over your nights. Once the monster they swore would cage you, and now it rests in your hand like a paper toy, weightless, almost laughable. That's the humiliation. Not that you survived it, not that you blocked it, but that you own it now. Their thunder has become your whisper. Their mountain has shrunk into a pebble in your palm, and they know it. Look at them, leaders, polished in silk suits, drenched in arrogance. Their lips once curved with certainty, now those same lips tremble as if stitched shut by disbelief. Generals stare at maps that no longer matter. Armies, once lions, are reduced to sheep gnawing on the bitter grass of shame. Corporations that crafted the machine, that fed its teeth and sharpened its claws, they sit frozen, like gamblers who realized the dice weren't theirs to throw. That's dominance. Not a war won on battlefields, not a crown forged in fire, but the quiet revelation that their end of the world was the beginning of yours. They thought the weapon was the end, but in your grip, it became the beginning. Read that again. The ending they plotted became the opening line of your story. The script flipped so fast, it snapped their wrists trying to hold on to it. They wanted a curtain call. You gave them Act 1. Dominance is not just owning the weapon, it's shrinking it, until it no longer resembles what it was. What was once a blade sharp enough to carve kingdoms, is now a dull spoon stirring your tea. What was once fire bright enough to scorch cities, now flickers like a candle in your hand, melting down, begging to burn itself out. Weightless, insignificant, yours. Humiliation bleeds deeper than defeat. Defeat can be excused. Bad timing, wrong strategy, unlucky break. But humiliation eats their spine. It carves into their ego like acid. It whispers into their sleep. You were never as powerful as you thought. Look at them again. A table of leaders, heads bowed. A room of investors, pockets empty, eyes hollow. An army of soldiers, once roaring, now whispering prayers to be unseen. Dominance doesn't shout. Dominance stares until they collapse under the weight of their own disbelief. And disbelief is lethal. It's not the weapon that kills them. It's the realization that the weapon never mattered. It wasn't the steel, the fire, the chaos. It was always about hands. Steady hands. Your hands. Hands that don't tremble. Hands that don't just hold the weapon. Hands that bend it, break it, own it. See the beauty in that. Dominance is not destruction, it's conversion. They aimed to end you. Instead you turned their end into your genesis. They tried to shrink you. Instead the weapon shrank before you. They believed they had authored the final chapter, but you tore the page out, rewrote it, and set the whole damn book on fire. That's dominance. It's not the size of the weapon, it's not the terror it once carried, it's the humiliation dripping from their silence, as they watch you cradle their nightmare, like it's nothing more than a child's toy. And that silence is the loudest scream they'll ever make. The weapon, the one they built with trembling hands and endless nights of calculations, the one they fed billions into, calling it the giant, the one they told their people would secure their future, erase their enemies, and crown them untouchable. Now, that so-called giant looks like a toy in your grasp, fragile, weightless, stripped of its myth, reduced to silence. The crowd that once bowed before it now stands frozen, eyes wide, jaws slack, disbelief dripping from every face. Their soldiers falter, the lines break, their uniforms don't protect them anymore. You can hear it, the whispers crawling from throat to throat. If he could bend the strongest weapon into nothing, what chance do we have? That's when fear starts to eat them alive. Not the fear of the weapon, not the fear of war, but the fear of you. You see,
weapons are only powerful because people believe in them. They worship them, feed them with dread, polish them with ritual. They treat machines like gods. But the moment you walk in, their gods collapse into dust. Your aura, yes, your aura, becomes heavier than their arsenals. It presses on their lungs. It paralyzes their feet. It tears their confidence limb by limb, until they can't even raise their heads to meet your eyes. The weapon shrinks, but you expand. You rise above it, like a shadow swallowing the sun. And here's the humiliation. It wasn't the weapon they trusted. It was the promise behind it. The promise of safety. The promise of control. The illusion that nothing could topple them. But in your hands, that promise snaps like a twig. What they thought was the end of you became the beginning of them, bleeding out their faith, choking on their illusions, watching their empire tilt toward collapse. Picture this. The weapon rattles in your hand as though it knows who owns it now. It's not theirs anymore. It doesn't belong to their generals, their scientists, or their boardrooms. It belongs to you, because everything they make, everything they worship, everything they build to protect themselves, it was always destined to serve the one bold enough to strip it bare. And now their people whisper in corners, "He doesn't fight like us. He doesn't fear like us. He doesn't break like us." Their leaders stare, hands shaking, trying to hold back the truth bubbling in their throats, that no wall is high enough, no army is strong enough, no weapon is giant enough. Because what is a giant when it stands next to someone who bends giants into nothing? So the soldiers falter, the crowd trembles, the whispers echo louder, spreading like cracks through stone. And soon the question no one dares to answer becomes the only question that matters. If the weapon meant to end him became his trophy, what chance do we have when he comes for us? That's not dominance. That's not just victory. That's annihilation of belief itself. Because once they see you hold their god in your hand like a dead feather, every other weapon, every other wall, every other defense they cling to is already broken. And the humiliation burns them more than the defeat, because they didn't just lose the war, they lost faith in their own power, and now their only weapon left is the fear of you. They thought the end of you would come with steel, with fire, with a weapon crafted in silence, sharpened in secret, raised high above your head as if destiny itself obeyed them. But you don't just destroy what they give you, no, you use it. The tool meant to cut you down now bends in your grip, trembling like a slave in the hands of its true master. It was never theirs. It was waiting for you. You take their creation, their so-called masterpiece, and twist it into something greater. A tool, a servant, an obedient shadow that reshapes the battlefield not against you but for you. The sword that once hunted your blood now carves the foundation of your empire. Every strike once meant to end you becomes a stone laid beneath your throne. Every machine once designed to crush you now works in silence under your command. And they can't speak about it. They can't even whisper. Because how do you explain that the very thing you built in secret, the weapon you swore would win the war, is now bowing before the enemy you swore to erase? Your empire grows not because you fought harder, but because you made their strongest invention kneel, their tool, their pride, their nightmare. Now it obeys you like a loyal dog. You don't raise your voice. You don't scream commands. Your aura alone directs it. Your silence bends it. Your command is etched into its very structure, and it obeys without hesitation. They look at you and see something impossible. The man who did not destroy their weapon, but repurposed it. The monster who built his empire with the bones of their inventions. They fear destruction, but what terrifies them even more is obedience. The idea that what they built could love you more than it loved them, because destruction ends stories, but obedience, that rewrites the narrative, that gives birth to new empires, that turns nightmares into monuments. And your empire is not built on mercy, it is built on obedience, on silence, on the tools that once betrayed you now standing in line waiting for your next command. The battlefield bends differently now, not because you carry weapons, but because you are the command, the empire, the apex predator with no need to roar. because even their weapons listen when you whisper, and the world learns the cruelest truth of all. What was designed to break you, now builds you. What was created to erase your name, now carves it into eternity, and the tool obeys, because the tool knows it never truly belonged to them. You see, a war isn't over when the weapon drops. It's over when the memory of that weapon burns itself into the enemy's mind, etched there like a scar that never heals. That's what you gave them, not just defeat, not just humiliation, but an eternal reflection they can never escape. Because now every time they forge a new weapon, every time they polish the steel, every time they load the chamber, they see you, not their generals, not their blueprints, not their brilliant plans. They see your shadow, your grin, your presence bending the battlefield. Their strongest invention became their strongest curse. The reminder that no matter what they build, you've already turned better into dust. They will never again hold a blade without their hand shaking, never again raise a gun without hearing your laugh echo in the chamber, never again launch a plan without tasting the bitter memory of the last one, the one you twisted, flipped, and made yours. That's the kind of fear that doesn't die. That's not a scar, that's a living ghost. It follows them, haunts them, whispers at night when they try to rest. You didn't just break their weapon, you broke their confidence. You broke their cycle, and once confidence shatters, no machine, no bomb, no army can save them, because every creation now begins with hesitation, every design now begins with doubt, every strike now begins with the reflection of your face, smirking back at them from the steel. That's the real victory, not that you survived their weapon, but that they'll never build without fearing you again. You've become the ghost in their system, the eternal lesson in their memory, the uninvited architect of their downfall. And here's the punchline: they thought they'd teach you a lesson with their weapon, but now their biggest weapon teaches them every day who you are. Their blueprint is stained with your laughter, their steel is forged with your command, their silence obeys your voice. The cycle is dead, the balance is destroyed, and the battlefield belongs to you. So when the dust settles, when the silence falls, and when history asks, what happened to their biggest weapon, the answer will cut deeper than any blade. It obeyed, it kneeled, it bent, and it became yours, because in the end, their biggest weapon now obeys you like your smallest tool.